كلية الفقه الحنفي تقدم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Hope everyone's doing well. So welcome to our last session of this semester, in which we were discussing the books of the Dala'il al-Madhab, and I kind of skipped some centuries because I wanted to get into the very famous book of Maulana Zafar Ahmad Uthmani, the I'la al-Sunan, and we spent last session discussing some of the background to the scholarly milieu of how this book I'la al-Sunan comes into fruition. And it's, you can't take away the massive rationale behind that, which is the defense of the Hanafi madhab against the Ahl Hadith. That being said, that's not the sole purpose behind this work. So that's not to say that that's the only thing that Imam Zafar Usmani does in the book. There are examples of him in which he tackles contemporary debates and discussions, some internally to Hanafis. So you have like masail such as what to do with the finger in Salah. So these are internal disputes with the Hanafis. And there's also some, very much subcontinent debates, such as the debate regarding Muttahida Qawmiyat, which is the position held by numerous scholars in the subcontinent, Abu Kalam Azad, and then many Deobandi scholars like Hussein Ahmad Madani, Mufti Kifayatullah, which is that we're going to argue for a united India, so therefore we can unite as one qawm with Hindus. And Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanwi and then his nephew Maulana Zafar Ahmad Usmani, they were opposed to this idea. So in the I'la al-Sunan, you have a risala written by Maulana Zafar Usmani in which he tackles this point in quite some detail, refuting what in English is referred to as composite nationalism. If you are interested in looking at that, you can go either to the direct source I'la al-Sunan, or there is a summary of the content by Muhammad Qasim Zaman in his book Ulama in Contemporary Islam. That's somewhere you can do some further reading on that. So anyway, so what we're going to look at in today's session is we're going to go for a section of the I'la al-Sunan, so that way we can see the manhaj of the author, what he tries to do, and then hopefully by the end, last segment, we're going to mention some of the objections to the I'la al-Sunan, and I'll just give some very generic responses hopefully, and that will kind of conclude this semester of sessions regarding history and Dala'il. Okay, so the section we're looking at is in volume 1, Kitab al-Tahara, page 203. So if you go to the online, this is going to be this edition, right, which is available online. So is the newer edition. I'm not using that right now. It will probably be better to use the new edition I mentioned, which is in 25 something volumes, right, which is published in, I said I'll look it up, but I forgot to look it up. It's one that came out last year, which is also available a soft copy, but I'm just using the old edition which I got at home. And this is also available online on Waqfiyah. If you just write I'la al-Sunan, the PDF, this will most likely come up first. So on page 203 of volume 1, because it's touching upon a mas'ala that we discussed earlier, which is the bab is Babu iftirad al-madmada wal-istinshaq fil ghasl al-mafrood. So the chapter of the obligation of putting water in the mouth and the nose in the obligation ghusl, in the ghusl al-mafrood, in the obligation or obligatory ghusl. And if you remember in the Nasb al-Raya of Imam Zayla'i, it was discussed that he cites the various evidences, he looks into the evidence cited by Imam Marghinani, and then kind of concludes that the narration that suggests this is actually, the scholars of Hadith have said is fabricated. He doesn't challenge it. And then you have a narration of Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu, which Muna Zafar Usmani, Imam Zayla'i, Imam Zayla'i, he cites Imam Bayhaqi and Shafi'i questioning the authenticity of that hadith, and then he stops, or up to that's the end of the discussion. So he stops there. Even in the book Al-Inaya, which comes later, he also mentions the kalam of the scholars of hadith on that narration of Ibn Abbas, and he kind of also stops there as well. He doesn't go into the fiqh of it or any potential response if there is one. Now, how does he discuss the chapter here? We'll see, inshallah. So it's about 10-11 pages. We'll go through it quickly. I'm going to skip some parts, but just so we can get just to it. So page 203, volume 1. أنا علي رضي الله عنه, so at the top is the matan, right, this is the hadith. He goes, أنا علي رضي الله عنه إن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من ترك موضع شعرة من جنابة لم يغسلها فعل بها كذا وكذا من النار. قال علي رضي الله عنه فمن ثم عاديت رأسي فمن ثم عاديت رأسي فمن ثم عاديت رأسي وكان يجز شعره. رواه أبو داود وسكت عنه. وفي تلخيص الحبير إسناده صحيح فإن من رواية عطاء بن السائب وقد سمع منه حماد بن سلمة قبل الاختلاط. So we've got a narration here from Ali radiallahu anhu, in which this was actually cited by Imam Zayla'i from Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, saying this is a possible evidence that can be used. So this is why Imam Zafar Usmani starts off with this narration, that the one who leaves out a place of a hair from janaba, meaning he doesn't wash it, then such and such will happen from the fire. So Ali radiallahu anhu, since that day, will shave his hair off, because they do want to go into that potential. And this is Abu Dawud, and he goes, sakata anhu, Abu Dawud was silent about it. Here there is a discussion by the muhaddithin, firstly there's a discussion here because Imam Abu Dawud, he says in his letter, Ar-Risala ila Ahl Makkah, where he introduces his Sunan, the book, the Sunan Abi Dawud, that any hadith which I do not comment upon, so if it's something which is extremely weak, I will mention it. If I don't, then that's salih, that hadith is salih. And then the ulama differ, what did Imam Abu Dawud mean by salih? Was that salih lil-ihtijaj or salih lil-i'tibar? Salih lil-ihtijaj means that the hadith is authentic according to Imam Abu Dawud, and salih i'tibar means that the hadith can be utilized for consideration even though it may not be authentic itself. It could be, it could not be. Whatever case, it does give weight to it. So if Abu Dawud is silent about the hadith, that suggests that it's at least not extremely weak. So he comments, he says, sakata anhu, and then Ibn Hajar says in Talkhis al-Habir, the isnad is sahih. It's narrated by Ata ibn Sa'ib, and Hammad ibn Salma heard from him before he got muddled in narrating Ata ibn Sa'ib. That's when Hammad ibn Salma heard from him. So that's authentic, he says. Now, regarding this hadith, how does Mullah Zafar Usmani do istidlal from it? He says, أنا علي قال في التلخيص حبير لكن قيل إن الصواب وقفه على علي. He goes, but some scholars have said that the more authentic version is man taraka mawdu sha'ratin. That's actually the statement of Ali, not a prophetic narration. Qultu, I say, this is Zafar Usmani correcting or commenting upon Ibn Hajar's comment. والتعبير بقيل يدل على ضعف, right? Because Ibn Hajar said لكن قيل إن الصواب وقفه على علي. So Ibn Hajar said it has been said, the more correct version of this is Ali report, not the Prophet ﷺ report. So Zafar Usmani says that the fact that Ibn Hajar uses the word قيل, it shows that it's not strong going to him. على أن السكوت بداود عليه يدل على أن حديث مرفوع عنده والاختلاف غير مضر وقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم موضوع شعرة. So stop there. The fact that Abu Dawud mentions this narration, the marfu' version, and he's silent about it, shows that according to Abu Dawud, this is a more correct version. This is what Zafar Usmani is commenting. Then he says the point, موضوع شعرة, the place of a hair, دل بعموم الشعرة شعر أنف على فرضية غسل باطن أنف الجنب قاله شيخي. So he goes, my sheikh, Ashraf Tanwi, he goes, look, if you have to cover every hair, right, then do you not have hair inside your nose? So the hair inside your nose must be washed. That's what sha'ara means. That's your body hair, head hair, beard, right? So your nose hair must also include in that. So there's dalil in this of the nose, water being placed in the nose. He goes, this is what my sheikh, and this is how I talk about interesting contributions. So he goes, Mullah Ashway Tanwi mentioned this. وفي عون المعبود قال خطابي وقد يحتج به من يوجب استنشاق في الجنابة لما في داخل أنف من الشعر. So then he goes, furthermore, عون المعبود عزيمة by these sites from Khattabi, that those who use that say that placing water in the nose used as evidence because there is water inside there is hair inside the nose. والمراد بالفرض هو فرض العملي لأن حديث مذكور خبر واحد وبه لا يثبت فرض اعتقادي وإطلاق فرض عليها الشائع قاله شيخي. Again, an interesting nugget of faida. He goes that my sheikh Mullah Ashway Tanwi said that when you say fard, right, this is recorded as fard al-amali, that is obligatory for us to act upon because khabr wahid, right? It's khabr wahid. So therefore we say it's fard al-amali, but i'tiqadi we don't say it's obligatory to believe in because there's ikhtilaf here. So it's fard amali, not fard i'tiqadi. That's an istilah that he utilizes. So he goes, many times the word fard is used for both, and people get confused by saying if it's fard, it must be qat'i. Because you have to make a distinction. There's fard which is wajib al-i'tiqad and there's fard which is wajib al-amal. Right, Fard amali he's talking about. So this is how it's a fact that he mentions. Now, the next narration so now I'm just going from the matan to the commentary, the matan commentary. Go back to the matan now. Abu Dharr radiyallahu anhu narrates أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن السعيد الطيب طهور مسلم وإن لم يجد الماء 10 سنين فإذا وجد الماء فليمسه بشرته فإن ذلك خير. رواه الترمذي وقال حسن. This narration says that a person can do tayammum basically for 10 years if he can't find water. And when he finds water, he must wipe it over his body. Indeed, that is good. This is mentioned by Tirmidhi, and Tirmidhi says the hadith is Hasan. What does Mullah Zafar Usmani derive from this? He says that the narration Abu Dharr, he goes to Rawah Abu Dawud, Aydan. Abu Dawud mentions a longer version, and he says silent on it. In it says, فَإِذَا وَجَدْتَ الْمَاء, so you find water, then wipe it over your body. فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ. In تلخيص حبير it says رواه ابن حبان في الصحيح والحاكم مستدركه من طريق خالد الحذاء كرواية أبي داود وصححه أيضا أبو حاتم ومدار طريق خالد على عمرو بن بجدان وقد وثقه عجلي وغفل عنه من المجهول. Anyway, talk about authenticity of the hadith. Now, أول معبود says قال إمام أهل اللغة الجوهري في الصحة البشر ظاهر جلد الإنسان فلان مؤدم مبشر إذا كان كاملا من الرجال. So what does bashara mean? Because bashar means the outer skin. That's how Jawhari mentions it. It's outer skin. كأنه جمع اللين أدمى والخشونة البشرة وكذا في القاموس والمصباح. وأما أدمى فقال الجوهري الأدمى باطن الجلد الذي يلي اللحم. And the أدمى is the flesh which is inside the body, which is next to blood. In قاموس الأدمى محركة باطن الجلد التي تلي اللحم أو ظاهر عليه شعر. قال خطاب احتج بعضهم في إيجاب مضمضة بقوله وأنقل البشر ورد في حديث منكر عند أبي داود فزعم أن داخل الفم من البشر وهذا خلاف قول أهل اللغة لأن البشرة عندهم هي ما ظهر بدن وأما داخل الأنف والفم فهو الأدمى. والعرب تقول فلان مؤدم I'm not sure to read that part إذا كان خشن الظاهر ومحبور الباطن. So they go that some Khattabi goes, some scholars have tried to use this to say that because bashara is outer skin, they say that the inside of the mouth is also bashara. But he goes that's incorrect because that's referred to as udma, which is inside of the skin. قلت I say, Muazzafar Usmani says على تصريح الجوهري داخل فم الأنف ليس من أدمى لأن أدمى على تفسيره هي باطن الجلد الذي يلي اللحم. He goes that doesn't make sense because if you're talking about the actual meaning udma is what is connected to the flesh underneath, the meat underneath. That part then would Jawhari's lugha would suggest that the inside the mouth actually comes to the bashara, not udma, and therefore the hadith will apply to it. بل هو مما لا يليم وليس هو من الباطن بل هو من الظاهر فاستدلال إيجاب المضمضة في الغسل من جنابة بقول صلى الله عليه وسلم أنقل البشرة صحيح. Right, because so this makes a valid reading from that passage. It's actually a whole quote from Awlul Ma'bud he's given this citation from. Then he says وأما قول صاحب القاموس أو ظاهره عليه الشعر على شك لا يسقط استدلال بقوله الجوهري فإنه إمام جليل وقد جزم به على أنه يمكن التطبيق في قوله وقول صاحب القاموس بحمل حرف أو على التجميع and so on and so forth. Anyway, the point being is that the linguists differ, and he's just trying to present whatever evidence he could find. So this is another evidence because that could potentially show that the inside of the mouth can be demonstrated in the hadith by lugha, even though the linguists debate whether that can be applied to there or not. Now the last lughawi point we're going to come back to because there's a couple of interesting nuggets of information to take on board inshallah. So we're going to come back to this. Keep note of that point. Now back to the matan again. He goes عن محمد سيرين قال سن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الاستنشاق في الجنابة ثلاثا رواه الدارقطني في سننه وصوبه وفي التخريج الزيلعي this is the نصب الراية بعد نقله عن المعرفة لحافظ بن البيهقي هكذا رواه الثقات عن سفيان الثوري عن خالد حذاء عن ابن سيرين مرسلا ثم أسند البيهقي من جهة الدارقطني بسند صحيح إلى ابن سيرين فذكر لفظ الحديث المذكور وفي سنن الدارقطني وتابع وكيع عن الراوي سفيان عبيد الله بن موسى وغيره حدثنا جعفر بن أحمد المؤذن قال حدثنا سري بن يحيى حدثنا عبيد الله بن موسى حدث سفيان عن خالد حذاء. So this narration of Ibn Sirin which goes he states that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, so it's a mursal report, Ibn Sirin is a tabi'i, where the Messenger of Allah encouraged or we say let's the word sanna, let's keep it as that, of putting water in the nose for janaba 3 times. Daraqutni narrates in his Sunan and he says that it is correct, meaning this is the correct version. There is another version which is muttasil, which is saying is weak. The correct version Ibn Sirin mursalan. Okay. Now, what does he comment about this narration after some of the statements there suggesting that the mursal is a more correct version? He goes, Muhammad Sirin قال السنة اللفظ سنة هنا بمعنى أمر. So now the word sunnah is used. So he goes, sunnah literally means something is sunnah. Doesn't this go against the evidence of the Hanafis? Because he's saying sunnah to put water in the mouth. But the idea is that sunnah, when in the linguistic, in the istilahi meaning, it means something which is optional. But in the prophetic hadith, that istilah is not fixture. Sunnah means the Messenger of Allah practiced or commanded. He laid out this practice for us. So he goes, sunnah is the meaning of amr. كما ورد في حديث عبيد الله والحديث يفسر بعض بعضا فيلزم أن يكون استنشاق في الغسل واجبا فرضا عمليا لأن ظاهر لفظ الأمر هو الوجوب. Right? Because it says sunnah, this suggests that the Messenger of Allah commanded. And that's the linguistic meaning, and you apply the linguistic meaning to the word sunnah in the hadith because the istilahi meaning was not established yet. To do that will be known as being anachronism, where you use a later istilah and you try to apply it to a earlier time period where that istilah was not in action. So he goes, if it's amr, then the hukm amr by default is wujub. Right? He goes, وقال شيخي, my sheikh Mullah Shaytanwi said, وأما قوله ثلاثا فقد انعقد الإجماع على عدم كون هذا التثليث فرضا وواجبا. As for doing it thrice, he goes, then the ulama all agree that 3 times is not necessary here. فدل على أن المقصود هو قيد الأول لا قيد التثليث. What is clear then is that it's the first command, which is to put water in the mouth, is necessary, not 3. قلت وعندي هو بالمبالغة في التنظيف والاستحباب. And so Zafran Usmani comments on that. He says a better explanation is not saying that, but the suggestion is that it would be easier to say that this is just mubalagha, that put water in your mouth 3 times to make sure everything is clean. That 3 is not as a condition, rather putting the water in the mouth is a condition. Then he goes on to mention some information about the mursal report. He goes, ثم أعلم أن مراسيل ابن سيرين صحيحة, that the mursal reports Ibn Sirin are authentic. ففي جور النقي by Ibn Turkmani, this is a book written in response to Imam Bayhaqi, he comments. قال, we didn't go through this book, Ibn Turkmani's work, because time restraint. So if you do, you can go through it in the future, inshallah, what this book is about. He says, قال أبو عمر في أوائل التمهيد. This is Ibn Abdul Barr, in the beginning of Tamheed, he says, وكل من عرف بأنه لا يأخذ إلا عن ثقة. كل من عرف بأنه لا يأخذ إلا عن ثقة. For everyone that is known, that they do not take except from trustworthy people, فتدليسه وترسيله مقبول. فمراسيل سعيد المسيب ومحمد سيرين وإبراهيم النخعي عندهم صحاح. So he goes, everyone that is known for only taking from trustworthy narrators, when they do irsal, meaning when they drop their narrators, then we assume to be sahih, such as the marasil of Sa'id al-Musayyib, Muhammad Sirin and Ibrahim Nakha'i. This is from the marasil of Ibn Sirin. ثم ذكر أبو عامر بسندي عن أعمش قدر إبراهيم إذا حدثتني حديث فأسنده. And then this is a discussion regarding the a story in regard to Ibn Sirin. We're not going to go through that right now. Okay, so that's how they try to justify through that narration. Then we come across our is this our last narration? Actually, there's a few more. We'll see how much time we have. He says, Abu Hanifa narrates from Uthman ibn Rashid and Aisha bint Ajrud قالت قال ابن عباس رضي الله عنه إذا اغتسل الجنب ونسي المضمضة والاستنشاق فليعيد الوضوء بالمضمضة والاستنشاق. Okay, so this is the narration that was cited by Imam or alluded to by Imam Abu Hanifa in Kitab al-Asl, saying that we obligate putting water in the mouth and nose because of this narration from Ibn Abbas. And the narration is that when a person in the state of janabah does ghusl and he forgets to put water in his mouth and nose, he should repeat should he repeat the sorry I think the wording is a bit off here. Okay, the actual wording is that he would have to repeat the فليعيد الوضوء بالمضمضة. That's not the actual wording of the narration, but yeah, the actual narration wording is different, which says that he doesn't have to repeat it for the madmada, istinshaq, if it's for wudu, but for ghusl he has to. So I don't think that the wording here, I think there's a mistake here. Yeah, you can say it right. So he goes, إذا اغتسل الجنوب ونسي مضمضة واستنشاق فليعيد الوضوء بالمضمضة والاستنشاق. So he has to repeat the wudu by مضمضة واستنشاق. I think the wording is separate, but let's put that aside because I read it differently. But anyway, he says here, أخرجه الحافظ طلحة بن محمد في مسنده عن محمد بن مخلد عن علي بن إبراهيم الواسطي عن يزيد بن هارون عن أبي حنيفة رحمه الله، وأخرج إمام حسن زياد في مسنده عن أبي حنيفة كذا في جامع مسانيد ورجال ثقات، وأخرج الدار قطني بطريق أسباط وعبد الله بن يزيد and so on and so forth. So you have Abu Hanifa narrating the sanad by the route of Rashid, Uthman al-Rashid, from the route of Aisha ibn Ajrud from Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So that's from Ibn Abbas. So that's the narration that Imam Hanifa narrates from. And then he says وعلّوا بيهقي بأن عثمان الراشد وعائشة بنت أجرد غير معروفين ببلدهما كذا في زيلعي. So as he quotes from Imam Zayla'i, the comments of Bayhaqi, which suggests that the Uthman al-Rashid and Aisha are غير معروفين, they're not known. So you can't use this hadith and weaken it because of that. The comment, he says, قلت, I say, Uthman روى عنه أبو حنيفة والثوري. The Uthman Rashid, Abu Hanifa and Thawri both narrate from him. Ibn Hibban mentioned min thiqat. Right? Aisha ibn Ajrud, Hajjaj ibn Aratat also narrates from him. And Uthman was corroborated, تابع عثمان على روايته عنها in the Dar Qutni, is a corroboration of Uthman from the Dar Qutni. وليس مجهول من روى عن اثنان. And the rule is that someone who there's two people narrate from can't be considered as majhul. وعرفها يحيى معين فقال لها صحبة. Yahya Ma'in recognized her and he said that she had صحبة, she was a companion. كذا في التجريد الذهبي. فالحديث حسن صالح احتجاج ولو الشاهد صحيح من مرسل بن سيرين. This is a hadith corroborated what Ibn Sirin mentioned in the Mursal report, that you put water in the mouth. And so with that corroboration and the fact that this hadith, the narrators are not discarded, right? There's actually weight for them. The narration should be considered as being authentic. So now in the comments of this, Muzaffar Usmani says that the Abu Hanifa hadith, he says, قلت طلح محمد الشاهد عادل قال الذهبي. So he talks about the isnad up to Abu Hanifa, which is fine. And then he goes on to talking about he goes up to Abu Hanifa لا يسأل عنه. So the sanad up to Abu Hanifa is fine. Abu Hanifa you don't have to ask about, he's trustworthy. Then he says وباقي إسناد حققناه في المتن. The rest of the sanad we've discussed in the method, which is that Uthman al-Rashid and Aisha Ajrud, they're both fine narrators. ودلالة الحديث على معنى الباب ظاهرة. And the meaning of the hadith on the chapter is clear. Like I said, I think there's a mishap in the typo here. I'll read you the actual hadith in the next segment, inshallah. The fourth hadith that he cites, or the fifth one we're on right now, is عن عبيد الله بن موسى قال حدثنا سفيان عن خالد حذاء عن ابن سيرين قال أمره رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم استنشاق من الجنابة ثلاثا. Here the word أمر comes, which further explains that. And then we have the narration from عن الثوري عن يونس هو ابن عبيد عن حسن قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم تحت كل شعرة جنابة فبلوا الشعر وأنقوا البشرة. This is referring back to the previous discussion of Bashara, using that again. This is narrated by Abdul Razak al-Musannaf. Bayhaqi says وإنما روي عن حسن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مرسلا أو عن حسن النبي هريرة موقوفا. So some debate is mursal or موقوف. قلت رجال عبد الرزاق رجال صحيح وقد مر أن مراسيل حسن صحاح وهو مرسل صحيح قد أعاض له قول أبي هريرة موقوفا وقد مرس موصولا عند أبي داود والترمذي وابن ماجه وفي حارث بن وجيه قال الترمذي ليس بذلك, and so on and so forth. Anyway, that's the end of that section. And there's commentary on these narrations, but you start to get a feel of the discussion of Mulana Zafar Usmani and the way he kind of engages in it. And what you see here in this discussion of Mulana Zafar Usmani is a range of sources that are discussed across madhahib, where there's discussions of fiqh, there's unique insights, as well as books, as well as a deep dive into the asanid. So he challenges a lot of what the muhaddithun have said directly. So if you look at the Zayla'i quote of Bayhaqi, where he stops there, Muzaffar Usmani actually challenges those quotations and says, no, I think there's a good enough reason to think the sanad is correct. Yes, I just opened up Zayla'i's Nasb al-Raya again. I don't have time to go through the original quote of Jami' Sanid right now. But the narration is as follows: Ibn Abbas, في من نسي مضغ استنشاق قال لا يعيد إلا يكون جنبا. The person who forgets to put water in the mouth and nose, he says, you will not repeat except if he is in state of janaba. That's the narration. The wording here was من اغتسل جنب ونسي مضغ استنشاق فليعيد الوضوء بالمضمضة والاستنشاق. Right, unless the wudu here is a reference to washing oneself. I'm not too sure. There seems to be some typo. I'll have to go check the other edition to see if that's accurate. Maybe one of you guys could do that, inshallah. Okay. So by that discussion, we see, I was trying to explain some of the parts, what's going on here in the the book I'la Sunan. And if you kind of look through this, you just see some of the sources that he's citing and the variety of them, which makes it very useful. So whether you agree or disagree with the content, as some opponents would try to put question marks on it, and even some of the points here, I'll try to explain a couple of reasons why I think they are very useful. So, for example, in this discussion, we saw a citation from Talkhis al-Habir, that's of Ibn Hajar. He has citation from his Murashfi Tanwi. He cites Awn al-Ma'bud, that's Azim Abadi, who cites Khattabi. So, if you want to put that under his source, that's up to you. Again, Talkhis al-Habir again. Then he goes to books of Lugha, the Qamus, etc. He cites. Then we've got him citing from Al-Jawr al-Naqi of Ibn Turkmani. We see him citing Mizan al-I'tidal of Al-Dhahabi, the Jami' Masanid of Al-Khwarizmi. Then within the text that's beyond the fact of the hadith, like Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasai, Ibn Majah, Muslim, Ahmed. You see him citing again Jawr al-Naqi again, the Nasb al-Raya. We see also citations from Bahr al-Raiq. So at the end, what's interesting is that what it says kind of makes his book stand out. He says قال البحر أما ركن أي الغسل فهو إسالة الماء على جميع ما يمكن إسالته عليه من البدن من غير حرج مرة واحدة حتى لو بقي لمعة لم يصبها الماء لم يجزي الغسل وإن كان يسيرا لقوله تعالى وإن كنتم جنبا فطهروا أمر الله سبحانه وتعالى بالإطهار بضم الهاء وهو التطهير جميع البدن واسم الذي يقع على الظاهر والباطن. So he quotes Bahr al-Raiq, where even the fiqhi masla is also mentioned as well, which I said kind of makes it stand out from some of the books of Takhrij. So it's not just a simple Takhrij, the fiqh is mentioned as well. So he has this lengthy citation from Bahr al-Raiq and the evidence is there. And then he goes into some other masail. At the end he says وأيضا, at the end of it he goes جواز تلاوة القرآن للمحدث وعدم جوازية للجنب يدل على أن الجنابة حلت فم الجنب فيجب عليه المضمضة فافهم فثبت بجميع ما ذكرنا وجوب المضمضة واستنشاق في غسل الجنابة وهو قول أبي حنيفة وأصحابه ولله الحمد. At the end he mentions an interesting extra point is that why is it in the person in a state of minor impurity can recite Quran, but in major impurity they can't? So because in major impurity the reason why is because the hadith had reached the mouth. So the mouth has to be pure, whereas in minor impurity the hadith has not reached the mouth, so therefore there's no need to. So he's actually made this extra analysis to point out there as well. Now, what I want to point out here is that Mawlana Zafar Usmani in this book, which he actually says later on in some Urdu articles, is that he's basically trying to provide all of the Hanafi case. And he's not fully convinced by all the arguments himself, which is quite clear from his chapter on the topic of Darul Harb and Darul Islam, where is riba permitted in Darul Harb between Muslims and non-Muslims. In the I'la Sunan, he provides the evidences given by Abu Hanifa. But his own fatwa, which he gives outside of I'la Sunan, is that it's not allowed. And when asked, he goes, look, in this book, I'm providing all the evidences for the Hanafi madhab and how you can demonstrate the case for the Hanafi madhab using those sources. And so therefore, there may be cases in here that a person may not be convinced by, and it's possible that he himself may not be fully convinced by it. But the point is, he's presenting a case. And also what's important to note is that the case is usually provided with a number of different evidences. And this is where I want to kind of point out is that when it comes to the I'la Sunan and similar works for that matter, is that you've got a main thesis that you're trying to argue for. So your main thesis in this chapter is to say that madmada wa istinshaq is from the fard al-ghusl, is from the fard al-ghusl to put water in the mouth and nose. That's your main thesis. Now the evidence that are going to come regarding that are going to be of different weight. So for example, you may go and open this book up and say, I think his discussion of the lugha is wrong. Bashara cannot refer to inside the mouth because of X, Y, and Z reason. And you may want to nullify that. That's fine, and nor do I think that Mawlana Zafar Usmani may have taken that to extreme with saying that this is the meaning. Rather, he's saying, look, this is another wajh, another way we can explain it. Some may find it convincing, some may not do, and some may find it when refuted. No problem, but we're not, when it comes to fiqh mas'ala, and you go for i'la, not just any other book, whatever madhab it is, it's usually not based upon single evidence. There's usually a range of evidences that are taking place, and you have to kind of attack each one and then try to come out with the overall conclusion. That's why a lot of it is based on tarjih. It's not usually based upon authentic hadith versus weak hadith, right? It's based upon multiple narrations, multiple aqwal, and then some analogy, some other arguments, and thereafter you get to a conclusion that one must, take it upon, where you get to a conclusion and say, I think this side is more stronger by weighing up all these evidences. And I said the evidences could be a verse of the Quran, as Imam in Bahr al-Raiq cites, فَالطَّهَّرُ suggests مُبَالَغَ فِي التَّنظِيف, there was the argument mentioned about the distinction between major impurity and, and minor impurity in terms of the mouth or not being able to recite the Quran was added at the end. There's an Athar of Ibn Abbas which is quite explicit, but there's a debate about its authenticity, and he argues for its authenticity. There is a debate regarding the word bashara in terms of lugha. There is a narration from Ibn Sirin which is mursal. Mursal, is it authentic or not? There's a debate here, but he's going for the side of authenticity. Okay, fine. But then if someone says it's not authentic, or it has some, it's not going to be a major weakness, and that narration shows the word, it says sanna, which is he practiced or established his practice. From there, sanna, he's going to meaning that sanna here means amara, because another narration also supports that. So you've got all of these points, and you can probably think of more that he's added in there. And then you have to look at the opponents are going to mention another 5-6 points of responses to each, and the responses may vary. So each one may not be super convincing, so you end up with tarjih at the end, where you think, you know what, overall I think the Hanafis have got it right, because when you're doing ghusl, the Quran says to purify ourselves, and the word uses mubalagha fi tathir, so therefore water gets your nose and mouth. I also mentioned to point out about every hair, and there's hair in the nose, so therefore that needs to be cleaned as well. These are all adding together to show that the Hanafi position is stronger. Or you may go to the contrary. But what you do realize here is not a simple point of this is that this is completely batil. There may be certain arguments you may think is extremely weak, but the whole case will usually have numerous factors involved that you have to consider, which have varying levels of strength, which he himself would confess to. He's not saying every argument is qat'i. He's putting out potentials there, saying, look, this guy's an imam, consider what they say, consider what that said. So that being said, a lot of the critiques on I'la Sunan, what they do is, for example, they may take up the point of lugha, and they would say, because I'm going to touch upon this I mentioned before, they would say, you know what, the term bashara referring to inside is wrong, and this is not what this imam meant, and so look at the weakness of Mullah Zafar Usmani's case here. Look what he's trying to say, how weak it is, and you want to magnify this, what may potentially see as an error. And the person reading it, who's not read the full argument, saying, what, is this the type of argument by in I'la Sunan? I thought it was a strong argument, right? Is this what he mentions, right, for their argument? But when you go through it, you notice that he mentions 5, 6, 7 evidences, and along which are of different weight. Some are quite clear, some are not so clear. Some require a bit of a stretch, some don't do. So when you're trying to look at the critiques of I'la Sunan, which I'm all for, I'm not saying every case is super strong, they might be different, like I said, it varies and also comes with perspective. Many a times you have students of knowledge that when they engage in fiqh al-muqaran, looking at adillah, you'll find sometimes positions which, as Hanafis, you may think, is the evidence strong or not on this, right? And there'll be non-Hanafis saying, your case is very strong here. I remember many years ago, there was the discussion of nikah bi ghayri wali, woman getting married without a wali. And this is something which, there's an explicit hadith, and you think, well, how do I explain this hadith? It seems difficult because it seems quite clearly that nikah is batil. And so we have arguments, and I remember there was a very accomplished non-Hanafi Hanbali scholar saying that I think the Hanafi case for nikah bi ghayri wali is very strong, because the word batil in the hadith doesn't mean void in the way we understand, nikah fasid or nikah batil. That's not what the prophetic wording means, and that clicks for him, and it made a lot of sense for him. So that's where we say that the issue is ijtihadi, and the Hanafis have a range of evidences that you're utilizing to substantiate a point. So the critiques against I'la Sunan are fine, you're more than welcome, and even like some of the usul that Mullah Zafar Usmani uses, we don't have time to delve into because it would just become a I'la Sunan centric lesson, and we don't want to do that. We want to kind of highlight some of the key points here. That kind of allows us to appreciate the work, benefit from it, but also keep a critical eye, but understand that not every argument has to be qat'i or super convincing. There will be some that vary, some that you can relate to, some you can't. But this is one of the most comprehensive books, as you see, where it takes in a lot of what's mentioned by Zayla'i, mentioned by other Imams, and kind of puts it together. So that's something that I would advise everyone to have a check out on. Inshallah, you'll find it very beneficial. So with that, we conclude our last lesson of this semester. And so with that, I'm trying to make a couple of points about what we've covered so everyone can be on the same page, inshallah. We tried to discuss in the first few sessions some points regarding taqleed from the book of Sheikh Saif al-Asri, in which we looked at the point of إذا صح حديث فهو مذهبي, We also delved into the issue of ijtihad, la inkar fi masail ijtihadiyya, and other few points related, related to that topic. And then we moved into this very brief introduction to the madhahib. So we looked at the Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali madhab with a brief intro into each imams, some of the key features of the madhab, key figures, and some unique features regarding each madhab. After that, we kind of delved into the topic of dalail. So we had some time with Imam Muhammad Hassan Shaybani's Al-Hujjah al-Ahmadiyya. We looked at Sharmani Athar Imam Tahawi. We looked at Tajreed of Imam Quduri. Then we moved on to the topic of Takhrij, right, where we touched on the different types of Takhrij and Zayla'i's Nasb al-Raya and the subsequent books. And then we kind of culminated in a study of, or a review, or some overview rather, best way to say, of I'la Sunan and some of the books surrounding I'la Sunan that were written at that time. And hopefully this kind of gives us a bit more of a better appreciation of some of how to understand the structure of the madhahib, and also the evidences within our madhab, some of the sources, not all, some of the sources, and the way that the Hanafis have kind of argued their case, and the development of arguments that you can see where by the time we get to Quduri and Zayla'i and then I'la Sunan, there's a fully fledged argument using words of Jarh wa Ta'deel of the Muhaddithun, whereas it's not found as much in the earlier sources in terms of that kind of methodology. It's more, here's the narration, here's another, and then we kind of present our overall case. But as the Muhaddithun develop and they present very, developed arguments about Isnad, so therefore there's a reaction to that, where initially people like Imam Zayla'i, that's kind of citing from them, they're adding some comments, and by the time we get to Imam Zafar Usmani and the Hanafis they're much more open in engaging with them, debating them, challenging them even on narrators and Isnad grading. So Bayhaqi will be challenged, not just accepted. So you see a lot of that take place in the last century. So hopefully we've kind of highlighted a lot of these benefited, I benefited myself inshallah going through these works again. And of course, if there are any questions how to get through to us, I'm sure the admin will help you. We'll stop here for now. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.